The transponder has been dark for 6 hours. On every maritime tracking system in the world, this ship does not exist. No flag, no AIS signal, no registered destination. You are standing on the bridge of a 300-meter tanker carrying 2 million barrels of crude oil that has no legal origin, no legitimate paperwork, and no country willing to admit it exists. The shell companies layered above this cargo would take a sanctions investigator 18 months to unpick. And by then, the oil will have been refined, sold, and turned into aviation fuel in a country that publicly supports every sanction that made this shipment illegal.
Level 1. The spotter. You start in a city that doesn't raise suspicion. Dubai, Istanbul, Kuala Lumpur, a place where the movement of foreign nationals is unremarkable and the financial infrastructure has enough gaps to be useful. You have a cover that took 3 months to build. A consulting firm, registered in a jurisdiction with minimal disclosure requirements, a website with 3 pages of vague language about logistics optimization, a LinkedIn profile with 14 connections and no photo. Your actual job is reading people. You spend your days in the margins of the legitimate energy industry, conference rooms, trade association dinners, the hotel bars where mid-level officials from oil ministries drink on expense accounts and talk more freely than they should. You are looking for a specific kind of person, not a criminal, not someone already compromised, someone standing at a particular intersection of financial pressure and professional frustration, where the right conversation, framed the right way, becomes an opportunity rather than a proposition. The ministry official who has been passed over for promotion twice, the compliance officer at a mid-tier shipping company who knows exactly which documentation checks are real and which are theater, the port inspector in a secondary terminal who makes $40,000 a year and processes $40 billion worth of cargo. You learn their names before you meet them. You know their salaries, their debts, the names of their children. Not because you researched them aggressively, because you listened carefully over 3 or 4 casual encounters that felt to them entirely coincidental. The pitch, when it comes, doesn't sound like a pitch. It sounds like a question, a hypothetical, a conversation between 2 pragmatic people who understand how the world actually works, as opposed to how it's supposed to work. Some of them say no. The ones who say no are assessed and monitored for 30 days to determine whether they represent a risk. Most of them don't. Most people who decline an illegal proposition simply go home and don't mention it, because mentioning it requires explaining why it was offered to them in the first place. The ones who say yes become assets, and assets are how the network breathes.
Level 2. The architect. You have a new name now. Not a false name exactly. A complete biographical identity constructed backward from the present day. Employment records, rental history, a university degree from an institution that processes enough international students annually that verification requests get lost in the queue. The identity is not designed to survive forensic investigation by a motivated intelligence service. It is designed to survive the kind of cursory due diligence that a mid-tier bank in a jurisdiction with flexible compliance standards performs when onboarding a new corporate client. That is a much lower bar, and most of the financial system operates at that bar. You are building companies now, not complicated ones, boring ones. A marine services firm registered in the Marshall Islands, a commodity trading house in Hong Kong with 2 employees at a registered address that is actually a mailbox in a business center, an engineering consultancy in Oman that has never completed an engineering project but maintains a spotless record of timely tax filings. Each company owns a piece of the next transaction. The oil leaves a sanctioned country's terminal under documentation that describes it as originating somewhere it has never been. It is transferred ship to ship in international waters outside the range of Port Authority monitoring. The receiving vessel carries different paperwork to a different destination, where the cargo is blended with legitimately sourced crude until the chemical origin is undetectable. By the time it arrives at a refinery in a country that has signed every relevant sanction, it is indistinguishable from legal oil. The money moves in the opposite direction through a chain of correspondent banking relationships so fragmented that reconstructing it requires simultaneous legal authority in 7 jurisdictions, which has never happened and will not happen because 3 of those jurisdictions have no mutual legal assistance treaty with any Western government. You live in a rented apartment in a city that is not your home. You learn the price of tomatoes at the local market because a foreigner who doesn't know the price of tomatoes is a foreigner who isn't paying attention, and a foreigner who isn't paying attention gets noticed. You attend Friday prayers not because of faith but because absence is recorded and attendance is not. You become, through accumulated small performances, someone who belongs. The cover is not a disguise you wear. It is a person you become through repetition until the repetition feels like memory.
Level 3. The enforcer. Most of the time, the network runs on paperwork and patience. Then something goes wrong. A rival group attempts to intercept a cargo in transit. A port official who was reliable for 3 years suddenly stops returning calls, which means he is either dead, arrested, or being run by someone else. A tanker captain decides mid-voyage that the risk premium in his contract does not adequately reflect the risk he is currently experiencing and begins making demands that cannot be accommodated through normal channels. This is when you travel. You arrive in places that do not appear on your itinerary. You meet people in hotel rooms and parking structures, and once in the back of a fishing boat anchored 2 miles outside a harbor where the conversation needed to happen beyond the range of the directional microphones that a foreign intelligence service had recently installed on the pier. You don't resolve problems with violence as a first option. Violence creates investigations, and investigations create exposure, and exposure is the only thing this network cannot survive. You resolve problems with information, with the demonstration that you know things about the person across from you that they did not know you knew. You resolve them with money, with the implicit understanding that the alternative to reaching an agreement in this room is a set of consequences that neither party needs described in detail. Sometimes that is not sufficient. The decisions made when it is not sufficient are not documented. They are not discussed afterward. They are absorbed into the operational record as a closed problem, and the people who know how it was closed are a very short list. You add those decisions to the weight you carry. You don't examine them closely. Examining them closely is not compatible with continuing to function, and continuing to function is what the network requires.
Level 4, the fixer. You run a city now, not officially. Officially, you are a logistics consultant with an office in a commercial tower and a modest apartment and a life that would bore anyone who looked at it for more than 30 seconds. But within a specific geography, a port city, a regional capital, a transit hub, every significant movement of sanctioned cargo passes through a decision you have made or a relationship you have built. You manage assets the way a station chief manages agents, with patience, with regular maintenance, with the constant assessment of loyalty versus risk. An asset who has been reliable for 4 years is also an asset who has 4 years of information about your operations and 4 years of accumulated grievance about whatever they feel they are owed. You track the drift. You address it before it becomes a problem. You sometimes address it in ways that are clean, and sometimes in ways that are not. The intelligence that flows through your network is worth more than the oil in some cases. You know which government officials in 3 countries are about to change their position on enforcement. You know which Western shipping insurance firm has quietly begun declining coverage for vessels operating in certain corridors, which tells you the intelligence services have briefed them on something they haven't made public yet. You know about the enforcement operation 6 weeks before it happens, because you have spent 4 years making yourself useful to people who are adjacent to the people who plan enforcement operations. You pass this intelligence upward. What comes back down is authorization for the next shipment, for the next route adjustment, for the next problem that needs to be solved in the way that some problems need to be solved. Your wife, on the phone through an encrypted relay, asks when you are coming home. You tell her soon. You have told her soon for 11 months. Something in her voice tells you she has stopped calculating the distance between soon and the actual date. That is either patience or resignation, and you have been traveling too long to know which one it is. You file it away. You get back to work. There is always more work.
Level 5, the Ghost King. At this level, you don't move oil. You move decisions. You sit in rooms where the conversation is never recorded, and the people present are never listed on any agenda. You have access to financial infrastructure that processes billions of dollars annually through mechanisms that a Senate subcommittee spent 8 months trying to understand and ultimately described in a classified report as architecturally resistant to conventional regulatory intervention. That report is in a filing cabinet somewhere. You have read it. It was reasonably accurate. The network you oversee has operated continuously for 11 years. It has survived 4 major sanctions regimes, 2 changes of government in client states, 1 significant penetration by a Western intelligence service that was contained before it reached your level, and the deaths of 3 people who knew enough to be dangerous. It has moved enough oil to fuel a medium-sized country's aviation sector for a decade. None of this appears anywhere, not in financial records, not in shipping manifests, not in the biography of any person whose name is publicly associated with the energy industry. The architecture of deception is complete enough that the deception no longer requires active maintenance. It simply exists, the way infrastructure exists, quietly processing the flow of things the world needs while the world looks somewhere else. You understand something at this level that you didn't understand when you were reading people in hotel bars. The sanctions you circumvent are not poorly designed. They are not naively constructed. The governments that impose them understand at the senior level that a certain volume of sanctioned oil will move regardless of the measures in place. What the sanctions do is raise the cost, raise the friction, ensure that the revenue is reduced, the route is complicated, the participants are exposed to risk that limits the scale of what is possible. The sanctions work, just not completely. And the gap between complete and incomplete is the geography you have lived in for 11 years. You think about this sometimes, whether what you have built is a criminal enterprise or a market response to an imperfect regulatory system. The distinction matters less than it once did. The network exists, the oil moves, the money flows, the people downstream from you in the chain make their decisions, and the people upstream from you make theirs. And you are the mechanism that connects them. And the mechanism does not have a conscience, exactly, just a function. You are very good at the function.
You retire into a name that has no operational history attached to it, a clean identity in a country with no extradition treaty. You buy a house. You sit in it. The silence is not the silence of the bridge at night, or the silence of a hotel room in a port city where the work is finished and the next problem hasn't arrived yet. It is the silence of a person who has spent 11 years being someone else and is now, for the first time in a decade, entirely alone with whoever he actually is. Somewhere right now, in a hotel bar in Istanbul or Dubai or Kuala Lumpur, a logistics consultant with a vague LinkedIn profile and a consulting firm registered in a jurisdiction you'd have to look up is buying a drink for a mid-level official from an oil ministry who has been passed over for promotion twice and has been carrying a specific kind of frustration for longer than he has admitted to himself. The consultant listens more than he talks. He remembers names. He asks the right questions. He has no idea what he is being built into. Nobody does at the beginning. The network is patient. The network has always been patient. The ghost oil moves. It always moves.